Hey, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going into the respiratory system. That is the breathing system, how you get oxygen into your lungs. But what you need to understand before going into this chapter is we do not put air in our lungs in order to breathe. All right, that's a common misconception. Now, every year I ask people, like, why are we putting air into our lungs? And they say, so we can breathe. No, other way around. We are breathing to put the air in our lungs. All right, you get your cause and effect backwards there. Right? So, why are we breathing? Why are we putting the air in our lungs? Because your lungs are surrounded by blood vessels. The air in your lungs are going to enter the blood. And then we learned in biology that the oxygen in your blood is going to go to your muscles and help provide energy. The oxygen will release energy from the sugar. So we are breathing to get oxygen to our muscles so that we can pull the energy out of the sugar. That's what the oxygen is for. Right? And then we're going to have leftover pieces from that chemical reaction, carbon dioxide, which will then go back to your lungs and you exhale to get rid of it. So let's go into a quick YouTube video that I'll talk over, and then we'll go into the vocab. In fact, I'm not going to let this guy talk. I'm going to keep it paused. I just want you to really see this picture. This is the skull up here. Here's your jawbone. You can see they did some really poor animation lips right there. And underneath, we see a bone that we talked about in the skeletal system called the hyoid bone. Just beyond your jaw, just kind of like a C shape going around the other side over there. Underneath that is your larynx. You may know that better as your Adam's apple. And yes, ladies, you have one as well. Everyone has an Adam's apple. Men's just tends to be bigger because of testosterone. This is also known as your voice box. So your voice box, where your vocal cords are, right here, and there's be some connective tissue holding onto this hyoid bone, keeping this in place and keeping it open. Underneath it is your trachea, which is the tube going down to your lungs. So when you breathe, the air goes through this passage down into your lungs. Just the front view of it. Air goes in, straight down this tube into your lungs. Going back to the side view, you will notice that behind it is another tube. This is your esophagus. We were going to talk about that in a different chapter when we talk about digestion. This is where food goes. Air is in the front, food is in the back. Yes, you actually do have two pipes. You have a windpipe and a food pipe. Windpipe is the trachea, food pipe is the esophagus. And how do you keep food from going down in here? Is because there's a little flap, kind of a trap door. So when you swallow food, your tongue actually pushes this trap door shut so that it blocks off your trachea. And then the food will slide down that trap door like an actual slide to the playground and into the esophagus, down to your stomach. That trachea will then split into two paths to each lung. And inside those lungs, the trachea is branching out into all these tiny little branches where the oxygen is spreading out, and each little end of each little branch is covered in blood vessels. So these are the big blood vessels going into the lungs. We're looking straight down, by the way. You're above this person. So here's the heart, here's the vertebrae, and you're looking in the lungs. Blood vessels go in to collect all that oxygen and bring the oxygen back out and spread it around your body. So let's talk about the vocabulary words. I believe we have 13 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 vocab words. And some of these you've seen before. So our first vocab word is inspiration. This is to breathe in, to inhale. You ever heard of being inspired? Like an artist is inspired. They have a quick revelation of what they should be doing, right? Well, you ever been inspired? What's the first thing you do? You go, oh, I have an idea. Right? That breathe in, the that's called inspiration. When they say someone is inspired, they don't literally mean they have an idea. The word literally means they had such a good idea that it made them inhale. Inspiration is inhaling. Expiration. the expulsion of air from the lungs, to exhale, to remove the air from your lungs. So expiration, that sounds like things going bad. Like food at the supermarket has an expiration date. Well, it actually used to mean death. When someone has died, they would say that they had expired. And they don't actually literally mean the death. They are specifically talking about that last bit of air. Just as someone dies, that last bit of air leaving their lungs, and that's it. So when they say they've expired, they've exhaled their last breath. Expiration isn't just the last one, it's every exhale you do. And then hyperventilation, I'm sure this is a word you have heard before. Hyper means high energy, and ventilation means movement of air, like the ventilation system in the building. So high energy movement of air, abnormally deep and prolonged breathing. That prolonged hard breathing, where you get a really big workout and you just you just can't catch your breath. This is hyperventilating. Now I'm dizzy. Whew. All right. Moving on. Now let's talk about the actual physical structures. Remember that larynx I showed you. Do I have a picture in here? But back to this picture. This is that larynx, the voice box, the Adam's apple, right? Inside this, you are looking down. Imagine there's a camera in the person's mouth looking down, all right, and looking inside this. You are going to be looking at the opening down into the trachea. And that's what this is right here. You are looking down into the opening into the trachea. This opens and shuts. See in the cartoon picture over here. When it's shut, the air doesn't move very easy. You see the white parts? Those are your vocal cords. When it's shut over here, the wind that's moving, the air that's moving, forces past these white parts, making them vibrate, and that's your voice. Just like plucking the string of a guitar or pulling a bow across the string of a violin. The air moving across these white parts, these are the vocal cords, makes the sound of your voice. When it opens up, like it is here, then air moves freely and these don't vibrate and you don't make noise. That's just you breathing. So the opening itself is the glottis, in between the vocal cords. Once you go down that glottis, go through that opening, you are now in the trachea. The trachea is part of the bronchial tree. This is the bronchi, or the branches of your lungs. The bronchi and their branches that carry air from the trachea to the lungs. So the passageway. So here, the trachea, and then it branches off into the lungs. Without the lung surrounding it, you see that it is a bunch of smaller branches that become even smaller branches, and the smallest branches are going to be covered in blood vessels so that the oxygen can move through the bronchial tree and into your blood. At the very tip of those branches, the very, very smallest branches, what we're looking at right here, has what looks like berries on the tip. Those berries, those little round structures, are known as alveoli, or singular is alveolus, or alveolus. I've heard both pronunciations. I don't care which one you use. That is one round structure, an alveolus, or a lot of them, multiple alveoli. These are the small air sacs in the lungs that transfer oxygen to the bloodstream. This is where the blood vessels wrap around into the smallest blood vessels imaginable. These blood vessels are so small that only one red blood cell at a time can go through, and they just go through in single file. So they're actually coming from this direction, going in, picking up oxygen from the lungs, and then rejoining the blood over here. These smallest blood vessels are known as capillaries. Blood with no oxygen goes in. By the way, not actually blue. Your blood is always red. We talked about that in the blood chapter. Textbooks like to use blue. So blood with no oxygen goes in, collects oxygen from your lungs into the capillaries, the net of blood vessels, and now blood with oxygen will travel back through your body. Now, how do we get the air into your lungs in the first place? Your lungs actually are not doing any work. Your lungs do not expand themselves because they are not a muscle, and you require muscle for movement. So in order to move the air, we are going to have a muscle known as the diaphragm. Underneath your lungs would be here, and underneath it is a muscle that's weirdly shaped. Is a sheet that takes up this space. And it because of connective tissue, it is sealed really tight in the spot. So when it contracts downward, it creates suction. And that suction is going to pull on the lungs. Taking a look right here at my model of lungs of science, think of this as the chest cavity right here on Indiana Bones, all right? So the balloons are his lungs, and the straw is his trachea going up his neck, and air going in and out of his mouth and his nose, right? Well, underneath it is a muscle. That's the plastic bag. This is the diaphragm. See how it is sealed, nice and tight. No air in or out. It's sealed up here. The only way air can go in is through the trachea into the lungs. So when this muscle contracts and goes down, all the air inside the bottle gets expanded. It creates a suction. And when it goes back up, all the air, it gets compressed and squeezes the lungs. So it's not about the air in the lungs, it's about the air outside, around the lungs. So it creates suction, and that air expands and pulls on the lungs. So when the lungs get pulled out, it draws air in. And when I compress the air, the air squeezes the balloons or the lungs, which pushes air out. So it's not about the lungs moving, it's about the diaphragm moving, creating suction or creating pressure. Physics. Should always pay attention to physics. Notice I'm not even touching the balloons. It's all physics. Thank you, diaphragm. So if you didn't write it, here it is again. A sheet of muscle in the thoracic cavity used to control breathing. Now, how do we get the air out of your lungs and into your blood? Going back up to this picture, the air is inside the lungs, but it needs to leave the lungs, somehow go through this wall of the alveolus, through the walls of the blood vessel and inside to the blood. How does it do that? Through a technique that we learned way back in Bio 1 called diffusion. Diffusion, the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Meaning, if we have a whole lot of stuff over here, in this case, this is oxygen inside the lung, and this would be, we'll say, the blood vessel wrapped around. So this is an alveolus, and this is the blood vessel next to the alveolus. If you have a lot of oxygen in here, the oxygen can just pass through the cells of your lung. See the little gaps here? Each little black thing we'll say is a cell. And the oxygen can go in between the cells of your lungs, of the alveolus, and then in between the cells of the blood vessel, oxygen will go into your blood. Over time, it would balance out. So every breath you take, then the oxygen just spreads across, diffuses across into your blood. And then the blood moves the oxygen around your body. Same thing with carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide will come back this way and go into the alveolus. And then you exhale the carbon dioxide out. Here's another picture. Here's the alveolus. Back up here. One of these round circles with the blood vessels around it. That's what we're looking at. the round circle, the alveolus, with the blood vessel around the outside. You breathe in, full of oxygen. The oxygen passes in. Here's a cell. Here's another cell, a cell, a cell, a cell. You can see it on the walls here. There's a nucleus, a cell with a nucleus, right? And there's a space in between. The oxygen will go in between the cells into the blood. And then the blood will carry the oxygen away to the rest of your body. Now, what are we going to do with that oxygen? I already talked about earlier. We are going to use the oxygen as part of a chemical reaction to unlock the energy from your sugar. You eat sugar. Sugar is full of energy, but it's locked in that sugar. Oxygen is the key to unlock it. We call that cellular respiration, the process of releasing energy from the molecules in your cells. Guys, we had a whole chapter on this back in Bio 1. I am not asking you to memorize the chemical equations again. I just want you to understand the concept. You eat sugar. Sugar has energy. You breathe the air. Oxygen enters your blood and goes to some part of your body that has the sugar. Oxygen and sugar together releases energy, and now you have energy for your body. That is cellular respiration, using the oxygen respiration in your cells, cellular, to get your energy. So how do we get it there? Is it just floating around in your blood? No, we need a life raft. We talked about this in the blood chapter. That life raft is your red blood cell. And inside your red blood cell is a protein called hemoglobin. Also, we talked about it in the blood chapter. This is not new. Hemo means blood. Globin means a glob. Yeah, that sounds stupid, but literally it's just a glob of blood proteins. You have a ton of these hemoglobin proteins, pigments, inside each red cell, and each hemoglobin can latch onto one oxygen, and that's what's going to carry it. Now, it's not just holding on either, all right? You can't. It's not just going to hold on to it, be like, oh, look, oxygen is just going to hold on and hold on tight. No, but it's the red blood cell. No, it's not going to do that, guys. It actually needs to blend into the cell, go inside the cell, and bond with it chemically and become a whole brand new molecule. And that brand new molecule has a name. This will no longer be hemoglobin. It will now be called oxyhemoglobin. Hemoglobin with an oxygen chemically bound to it. It is no longer hemoglobin. Chemistry makes brand new things. So this is a brand new thing made out of hemoglobin and an oxygen. So compound formed when oxygen combines to hemoglobin. Nice and easy. But we're not done. That blood will get to some part of your body. The oxygen will be released into that part of your body. And the oxygen will be used with the sugar, you get your energy, and then you got some leftover pieces we learned about in Bio 1, carbon dioxide, which is a poison. We want to get rid of that. So the next blood vessel that comes around with this hemoglobin will come and pick up that carbon dioxide. And when the carbon dioxide binds with the hemoglobin, it becomes deoxyhemoglobin. D means to undo, undone, right? So it was hemoglobin, releases the oxygen, picks up a carbon dioxide, and now it has been deoxygenated. It is deoxyhemoglobin. Compound formed when the carbon dioxide combines with hemoglobin. And like I said, carbon dioxide is a poison. So a little pretend time, all right, guys? We have carbon dioxide, which I can't show you. So we're going to pretend that this is carbon dioxide, all right? We don't want to breathe. This is bad. This is poison. Blah, blah, blah. We don't want that in our bodies. Even if it's on the red blood cell, it's still poison. So we need to water it down a bit. I mean that literally, water it down. We need to take this carbon dioxide and some of this water and put them together. But we can't just slam them together. It's not really working. If I try pouring them out, I make a huge mess, right? No, I need something to help me keep it together, an enzyme. Remember enzymes, guys? Proteins that have jobs to do, proteins that help with chemical reactions. Here's my enzyme. It is called carbonic anhydrase. With this enzyme, I can take my carbon dioxide, got a little carbon dioxide in there, which is poison, and then I'm going to water it down with actual water. And now that they're together, my enzyme is helping keep them together. Carbonic anhydrase, this enzyme, is keeping my carbon dioxide and my water together. And now that it's watered down, okay, it's still a little poisonous. It's less poisonous. And this is what's in your deoxyhemoglobin. And look. It is starting to separate already. Oil on top, water on bottom. Sorry, carbon dioxide on top, water on the bottom, right? They don't want to stay together. The carbonic anhydrase is keeping them together. And then they go into the hemoglobin and become deoxyhemoglobin. And then when you exhale them, there's nothing keeping them together. They break apart, which is why you see steam when you exhale in the winter, because that's the water. It's now water vapor in the air. So you are actually seeing the water vapor that was attached to the carbon dioxide. All right, so that was that last word, carbonic anhydrase, an enzyme that speeds up the reaction between carbon dioxide and water, that resulting what we call bicarbonate. This stuff in here is now known as a bicarbonate, carbon dioxide and water together. That resulting bicarbonate ion is easier to transport in the hemoglobin. All right, guys, that is your vocab for today. Nothing else. Good luck on understanding this stuff, and I will see you in class next time.